Test, test, test. What's going on, y'all? Hey, trying something a little bit new today that I haven't done before. I'm gonna kind of throw this over here for a second. Yep, okay, lighting's fine. Hey, so trying something new today that I haven't done before. I'm gonna be making essentially a YouTube exclusive video and seeing if I can't start a bit of a playlist on my channel or maybe make a new channel altogether dedicated solely to this type of content. But anybody that knows me knows that I'm a massive college football fan and that I like to kind of take a macro approach to the way that I view the sport. I'm not going to sit here and claim to be an expert or anything like that, but I would say that I probably know more than the average fan, right? Like I don't exist in this bubble where I only know about my team, their immediate rivals, their conference, like stuff like that, right? Like my footprint within the sport is relatively decent. So that said, I'm gonna kind of just do a bit of a breakdown of the upcoming games for this week. As we're going, we'll kind of discuss some things that took place last weekend, since I, obviously didn't do this yet. But this is sort of the formal version of what's gonna happen live on stream tonight, and I'll probably upload a video for that too. Maybe I'll do the new channel and then I'll have like the playlist for this, like the serious conversations, and then there'll be the Discord conversation with me and my friends in my fantasy league where it can get a little silly and whatnot. We'll see. I'm kind of still experimenting with this. I kind of like the idea of it. But I'm just gonna kind of ride the vibes and go for now. My intent is that I'm gonna kind of address some top 25 teams and their matchups for this week. A couple of the big games, obviously, that everybody's kind of got highlighted, and give my personal thoughts on the matter. And then I'll go and I'll pick some games that I really like that maybe aren't on some people's radar, and I'll discuss why. But without further ado, let's get right into it. We're wasting no time, okay? We're getting into what is easily the biggest matchup of week 2, and that's the Michigan Wolverines hosting the number 3 ranked Texas Longhorns in Ann Arbor at the Big House. 11 a.m. kickoff time Central, so 10 Eastern, unless I have that wrong. Is that 11 Eastern? All times based in Eastern. Does it say? Hang on. I'll know how I can find out if it's listed as 11 a.m. Eastern on my phone, which auto adjusts. So it says 11 a.m., which means 10 a.m. Eastern. Okay, so 10 a.m. Eastern, Michigan's hosting Texas. So let's talk about some storylines in this game, okay? Obviously, Michigan, defending national champions, beat my Washington Huskies in the national championship last year down in Houston, not too far from where I currently live. Had to endure that, right? But is this the same caliber of team? I think a lot of people after week 1 largely believe that's not the case. They lost a ton of talent under center with quarterback JJ McCarthy, the presumed starter for the Minnesota Vikings before going down with season-ending injury during the preseason. And then they also lose Blake Corum, their historic running back. Their offensive line had a lot of turnover as well, but Michigan seemed to be a team, or I guess a more appropriate term, a program that was built to endure that. And then what we saw against Fresno State last week wasn't entirely indicative of the level of dominance that we sort of expected them to exert. Now, I think people close to the program are under the assumption that Alex Orji was supposed to be the heir apparent at quarterback once JJ McCarthy left. And the expectation was that he would take the necessary steps forward in the offseason, developing as at least a capable enough passer to run the same kind of offense that they were running with JJ. Despite the fact that JJ is an infinitely better passer than Alex Orji could even have hoped to progress to be in the offseason. But all accounts seem to be that that is not what happened. I know people will look at the box score and say, but Alex Orji threw a touchdown pass, the only touchdown pass, if I recall correctly. And let me make sure I don't have that wrong. Oh, no, Davis Warren did throw a touchdown pass as well to Colston Loveland late in the game. But getting back to that, right, Colston Loveland, is he the best receiver that Michigan has right now? Stat line seems to say that. And if your tight end is your most tried, tested, and true option as a receiving threat, well, I got news for you. There's teams that are going to exploit that matchup, especially if you don't have threats on the perimeter. There's teams that are going to be on your schedule later. Maybe not for a majority of your schedule, but there's teams going to be on your schedule later with the athletes necessary to really hamper your ability to execute your offense, with those playmakers being paramount to your success. So, but going back to the quarterback position, we end up having Davis Warren, which, by the way, a phenomenal story in college football. If you're not familiar, please go educate yourself. This young man has been through hell and back, and he gets the starting nod by Sharon Moore in year one as head coach. Over the moon happy for him. He seems like a great kid. It's just, is this the composition at offense that Michigan is like really hoping for, coming off of a national championship? The fan base seems to believe that they aren't going to regress, that they're going to continue to ride this momentum, even with a new head coach, new coaching staff, offensive turnover. And the reason is because everybody was just like, our defense is still going to be so great that we don't have to worry about that. Like, we can still kind of grind people's bones to make our bread on offense because our defense isn't going to give up points. Now, Fresno State scores 10 on them. I don't think that is... I don't think that can be read either way. I think the defense looked really great on film. I don't think that we have underestimated that side of the ball by any stretch of the imagination. But is that really what you want to be leaning on for the entirety of your success? I think a lot of people were incorrectly critical of JJ McCarthy and their offense last year, saying they can't stretch the field, they can't make drives in critical situations, and they proved all of that wrong in the playoffs. They did it repeatedly. Most paramount being against Alabama in the Rose Bowl in that fourth quarter drive to go tie the game, and then of course the drive to win the game with Blake Corum running in the touchdown in overtime. So I think my personal take, right, is that this Michigan team is not what it was last year. I think that their hopes and expectations for offensive turnover to still retain a level of production necessary to see the same type of success, if not similar type of success that they had last year, I don't think it delivered in the offseason the way that they had hoped. That said, I still think that against most teams that they play, they are going to be able to execute their type of football. The problem is that the person that they are facing tomorrow, the team that they are facing tomorrow, isn't one of those teams. Now, this is not me hoisting my flag in support of, Texas Longhorns going all the way to the national championship. I do have some questions about this team as well, and we're getting to that right now. So, number 3, Texas, Steve Sarkisian, getting on the road, going to come to Ann Arbor in September and try to take down Michigan at home. What do I think about Texas? I think Texas is very clearly one of the better teams in the country. Do I necessarily endorse them as a blanket top 5 program? No. I know that is probably a provocative statement to make given the climate of college football right now. I will just say this. Here's my assessment of Texas. Texas had a really good year last year. Okay. And they deserve all the credit in the world for accomplishing what they did accomplish in the context of last season. They are the new shiny toy in the SEC. And yet their counterpart that comes with them, Oklahoma, has a far more dominant record over them in recent history. And yet nobody's really paying too much attention to Oklahoma. Just something to think about. Oklahoma also beat Texas last year, by the way. Their lone regular season loss came to the Sooners at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. So what do I think about Texas? So, in order to talk about Texas now, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about Texas last year. We'll discuss some similarities and differences between these two teams because I know people's first instinct, the second that you bring up things that happened last season, is to say that was last season, this is this season. And you're absolutely correct, right? Like that is very true. The problem is that until the games are played on Saturdays this fall, the only thing we really do have to go off of is whatever sample size we do have from this season and similar things returning from that team from last year. So let's talk about the biggest part. Quinn Ewers, okay? Veteran quarterback, under center, returning for what many expect to be his final year. I don't actually know off the top of my head if he is a sixth-year senior or not. I know he started his career at Ohio State, transferred. I don't know how many years of eligibility he's gone through. I know he's been at Texas for 3 years now, if I remember correctly. So if that means that he was at Ohio State for 1, Texas for 3. He could be a redshirt junior, could be a redshirt senior, because I could be missing a year here or there. It's kind of a moot point. Again, veteran quarterback presence under center. Is this the guy that is going to take Texas and propel them back into the national title picture? I think if you're a Texas fan, you're laughing at me right now because you're like, this is literally the guy that was in the playoffs last year. I also think he's the guy that lost you the game against Washington, quite frankly, because we can, as a Washington fan, I know that the immediate argument is going to be if Dylan Johnson doesn't even go down with that ankle injury, Texas is in no position to score late in the fourth quarter anyway, and that game is a 2-possession win for Washington. Fine, but the game transpired the way that it did. Texas did have an opportunity in the final minute to win the game, and what happened? Some errant throws and poor decision-making on Quinn Ewers' part gets them and loses that game for them. If that ball, 280 Mitchell, is on a rope and not lofted up in the air for Elijah Jackson to swat away into the sidelines, we're probably having a different national championship matchup. Because I believe that would have propelled Texas ahead of Washington. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do I have the scoreline misremembered? Let's see. Texas versus Washington. Yeah. So if they had scored a touchdown there, they would have literally just had to kick the extra point, and it would have been a 38-37 final. So we could have had a different national championship matchup if Quinn Ewers throws a better ball. Not once, but there was a couple other times as well. So, does that completely eliminate the possibility that he has progressed as a passer, made the necessary changes to his game, stepped up as a leader in the locker room, all the great things that you want to hear about a veteran quarterback under center? Has he done those things? Well, so far, the only thing that we have to go off is a complete and utter biblical ass-kicking of Colorado State last week. And things look great. The betting line for this game has shifted considerably. I believe it was at 4.5 last week, and then the Michigan game ended, and this line has gone all the way to Texas -7 now. The over-under is 42.5. So they're expecting some points to be scored here. The question is which team is expected to score those points? And that's where we bring up like the most interesting question, because Texas replaces all of their, I believe it was their top 4 leading receivers last season, gone. They've reloaded through the portal. Amari Niblack at tight end from Alabama. Isaiah Bond also from Alabama at wide receiver. They brought in a kid from Houston, I believe, at receiver as well. And let's see. I want to look at the box score for that one because there's that. 52-0. Box score. Texas receiving, true freshman Ryan Wingo, Isaiah Bond, Jonte Cook is back. Matthew Golden is the one that I'm thinking of. And they also have Gunnar Helmet tight end, too. I do remember him catching a nifty little touchdown against Oklahoma last season in the Cotton Bowl. So it seems, by all accounts, they're just kind of laughing all the way to the bank. Like, yeah, we lost our top 4 pass catchers. We have plenty, okay? You have plenty for the schedule that you played last year, though. This is my argument against this team, okay? And let me be clear here. There's some Big 12 fans that are about to get really, really upset with what I'm about to say, but Texas and Oklahoma have made their brands, as of late, feasting on an inferior conference schedule. Okay, you have been able to beat up on your foes in the Big 12 for well over 2 decades now, and that ain't going to be the case in the SEC. Now, of the 2 programs in the Big 12 best equipped to jump into the SEC and see marginal success, you're far and above the 2 best candidates, right? I don't think there's another team in the Big 12, including the 4 newcomers from the Pac-12, that can hold a candle to what you guys have done in recruiting and on-field success. Maybe Utah, right? Kansas State would like a word in terms of the on-field success portion, but that's more recency bias than anything, because we're talking in the last couple years, whereas like what I'm talking about with regard to Texas and Oklahoma, I'm talking about like decades, right? But wait, I don't actually believe what I just said, because I'm going to sit here and contradict myself with what I just said, because the reality of the situation is that Oklahoma has been the one feasting the most. Texas has been trying to get back, right? Now, the presumption is that they are officially back, and that's great. That sounds fantastic, and I hope for their fandom's sake that it's true, because imagine this. Imagine that we live in a world where Texas, coming off of a conference championship and college football playoff berth, in a year where they still lost to their biggest rival, mind you, goes into the SEC with all of this momentum and adoration from the national news media, rankings, polls, you name it, betting lines, as we've already discussed. And instead of getting dunked on by the SEC teams that everybody says you are going to have a harder time playing, you lose to Michigan in week 2. A Michigan team that is, by all accounts, worse than the team that won the national championship last year. Do I think it's going to happen? I'm going to give the road to success for both teams, and then I'll give my prediction, and we'll move on. How does Texas win this game? For one, they need to establish the run. Okay? That, in and of itself, presents some issues. Because against Colorado State, we talked about the ungodly beatdown that they produced. But for a team as talented as they are, they only average 4.6 yards per carry. Now, hand off the ball 3 times with those numbers, you're moving the sticks. Okay, fine. You're not moving Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant like that every down and distance. I don't care. I saw it. I saw it all last year. Those are the same 2 studs last year or this year that they were last year. That's not changing. So, establishing the run early needs to be a priority. Texas's offensive line is excellent, okay, for what they need to do to succeed. Should I say the expectations for their offensive line are that they will be all of those things that they need to be in order to succeed. From a receiver standpoint, well, Michigan does replace a couple of positions or a couple of players in their secondary. They also have the best corner in college football, Will Johnson. Now, I have my personal qualms with him. I think he held everything but Rome Odunze's jockstrap during the national championship last year. But where I will pause is that even if he isn't holding Rome like Rome is his wife or Rome is his husband and Rome's about to deploy for 9 months to a war zone, Michigan's defensive line was giving Michael Penix and Washington's offensive line everything it could freaking handle, forcing a lot of errant throws and bad decision making that Rome Odunze being open and not being held really wouldn't have had that much bearing or wouldn't have made much difference, right? Washington fan who is mature enough to admit that. So, you still have the best corner in college football right now, my personal opinion, Will Johnson. Okay, Colorado fans, don't at me. We'll talk about you guys here in a little bit. Is Michigan's secondary going to be enough to contain what amounts to be the strength of Texas's offense? I think it's going to be enough to slow them down. The question is it going to be, is Michigan's defense going to be potent enough to force the same kind of result that we saw in the national championship game against Washington? I don't know. I think it's easy to say that they backfill the positions or the players that they lost on defense way easier than they do on offense, because they retain a lot more talent on defense than they did on offense. The problem is, you look at a situation like Clemson versus Georgia in week 1. Clemson comes out the gate in the first half, and their defense looks really good. Their defense is keeping them in that game, but their offense, oh my God, like they could not score with divine intervention on their side. So what happens? The defense finds itself on the field a lot. And when those guys get tired, scoring on them becomes a lot easier. So, Texas's path to victory: establish the run early, take away what amounts to be the strength of this team, and force their offense to score points. Because I don't think Michigan's offense can score points at the same rate that Texas's has the capability to do. For Michigan, it's literally just the opposite. You shut down any hope of Texas establishing a run game. You keep a light box. And here's the thing. If you can do it with a light box, if you can do it with 4 down linemen and keep the rest of your defense in the secondary or at the second level and deeper, we're going to have a rock fight on our hands. I think, though, even with that said, which team has a better chance of scoring points in that kind of game? Michigan's run game with Kalel Mullings presumably taking the Blake Corum spot, because Donovan Edwards did not have a great game. Let's be clear, right? But if their run game is enough to grind Texas's defense down, then great. But here's the thing. If I'm going up against Texas, you want to know what I wish my offense could do? Throw the damn ball. Because everybody remembers the Sugar Bowl, right? I know I do, for obvious reasons. Michael Penix and those receivers decimated Texas's secondary. Okay? And they didn't really do much in the portal to fortify that portion of the team. They recruited very well, and they had a young secondary. The expectation is that they are going to take a step forward. Do we know that? Is Colorado State really the litmus test that we're going to fucking use to determine whether that kind of commitment to those players was worth it in the long run? Is Michigan the team that's going to even answer that question? Like, I don't think so. I think Texas wins this game. I think that the the spread at 42.5. I got that right? I know I said it earlier. I believe it was 42.5. Why does this keep going back there? Yeah. The spread, the spread of over under of 42.5. I'd be taking the under. I'd be taking the under all day. I don't think Michigan's going to score enough, but I don't think Texas is going to score as much as they think they are, or as people think they are. I'm taking Michigan to cover, but I'm taking Texas outright to win. It's just the way I see it going. I see that defense. I don't see Texas establishing a dominant run game, but I see Michigan's defense being on the field too often and getting too tired to deal with that bullshit. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So, covered the big game of the week. Let's go talk about a game that I touched on earlier. Actually, you know what? I said I was going to do top 25 first. So let's go to the only other top 25 matchup on the schedule, and then we'll start jumping around. The Tennessee Volunteers against the NC State Wolfpack. This is a neutral site game that's being played at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. So I'm told Tennessee's fan base is traveling well for this. I'm not shocked in the slightest. But this is in NC State's backyard, so we'll see. Tennessee currently a 9.5-point favorite. I believe this was at 9, literally like earlier this morning, if not last night. Over under point spread of 60.5. Okay, so noticeably larger than the last game that we discussed. Let's talk about these two teams. Okay, so I'll start with, I think, what the expectation is for this game, and then we'll kind of start perusing other avenues that we might find ourselves going down tomorrow evening. By the way, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC. So I think a lot of people are expecting Tennessee to just carve up NC State. Nico Iamaleava is looking every bit of a generational talent at quarterback. Their receiving core is exceptionally talented. Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, Trayshawn Holden's still with Oregon. Dante Thornton Jr. is the one that came from Oregon. But yeah, Brew McCoy, friggin' Dante Thornton. They've got Sampson, their running back, who had a really great week against Charlotte last weekend. NC State's defense is largely heralded under Dave Doeren for being gritty, for making teams earn every point that they get. I love that for them. I really do. The problem is that if you take a look at NC State's defense, the way that they maximize their talent disparity they often find themselves going up against is that their blitz packages are very creative. They're aggressive too, but they'll sometimes go in a 3-2 down set, right? And they'll be sending corner blitzes that most young quarterbacks never see coming. And let's face it, the quarterback play in the ACC typically isn't at the level that you're discussing in late November when we're talking about who's going to be in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Sorry to Jordan Travis fans from last year. Cam Ward might break the cycle this coming season. That's a conversation for another time. I'm talking about typically. Okay. Here's the problem. When you spread your defense like that and you are mixing and matching blitz packages, let me step back. I kind of got to the end point beforehand. When your defense is built on creative blitz packages with unexpected players coming off the edge or coming from deep within the secondary, Yes, that is very good at confusing young quarterbacks. You want to know whose offense is really, really good at exploiting that? One that's going to take your defenders at the second and third level and spread them to each end of the sideline. And that's Tennessee's veer and shoot type offense that they run. Now, Dave Doeren has seen this from his days back when Dana Holgorsen was the head coach at West Virginia. He ran the same offense. If everybody remembers this beautiful year there with the quarterback whose name I can't remember that beat Texas late in the year and then played Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game where I don't think anybody punted the ball until like the fourth quarter. It was absurd, right? That's great. It's great. Did he succeed against that offense? I'm literally talking about like the last time anybody can remember West Virginia being great. So we probably didn't see that then. Okay. So what do I think is going to happen? I think Tennessee is going to spread them sideline to sideline. I think Nico's arm talent and strength is going to be enough to rip this defense to shreds. I'm with the rest of the crowd here. I do not think that NC State defensively, as good as I think they will be with the rest of their schedule, this team is tailor-made to exploit them. Because if you want to set up creative blitz packages, yes, Nico's young. Yes, he still is in a bit of a prove-it stage of his career. I think he's going to answer. I think the bell's going to ring, and he's going to be there, game, ready to go. Like, I'm seeing things in his film that veteran quarterbacks do. Yes, he played Charlotte. Yes, he played Iowa. But Iowa's got a pretty damn good defense. And he did a lot of running in that game, not as much throwing. I don't see NC State being able to do enough to stop them because they're going to do spread option, essentially. They are going to try and establish a run game with NC State, keeping a 3-2 light box, if that's what they decide to line up in. It's feast or famine, and I think Tennessee's going to feast on that because their offensive line is actually pretty good, too. And then if they run commit, they start to load the box because Samson's just carving them up, well, you're literally playing into Tennessee's hand. And if you try to mix it up by setting up creative blitz packages, then Josh Heupel is just going to adjust the playbook. And I think Nico is the difference maker at quarterback that they haven't had since, I'm forgetting his name, quarterback from a couple years ago before frickin' Johnny Rocket Arm was there. The one that got injured towards the end of the season, and Milton had to step in. I'll remember it eventually. That's embarrassing. But I think that Nico has that. I think that his short and intermediate passing game is way better than what Milton had. And I think that if they need to adjust, so if you're going to send a corner and that route doesn't need to be deep, it only needs to be 5 to 10 yards, well, then guess what? We're just going to do that. And Nico has the intelligence, the discipline, and the arm talent to exploit it all day. I didn't want to spend too much time on this one. I think this is a top 25 matchup that is honestly going to see NC State falling out of the top 25 next week. Maybe I'm wrong. Because also another thing too, a lot of people are talking about Grayson McCall at quarterback for NC State. I'm not impressed. I mean, they had one really good year at Coastal Carolina. It has not been replicated since then. Experience is experience, but if it's mediocre experience, what do I care? Like, I mean, I'd rather have a veteran signal caller than a young one, unless that young one happens to be a generational talent. And I think that's what Tennessee has in Nico. So I'm taking Tennessee. I'm taking them to cover here. I think they win by at least 2 scores. A lot of people like this. this betting line. They think that NC State's gonna be able to pull something off, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't see it that way. I really just don't. Okay. So let's go on and talk about a couple of other games, and this will be a little bit more of like a lightning round because I do have to wrap up and go get my kids from school here in about 45-ish minutes. So I also need to change over my laundry. I'm actually going to pause real quick and go do that. This will work out in the editing later. I promise. I'll be right back. And just like that, I was never gone. So, gonna move on and talk about other games on the slate for this weekend that I like, that I'm interested in. A couple games happening tonight. We've got BYU at SMU, Duke at Northwestern. The SMU one's going to be a little interesting. Preston Stone named the starting quarterback for SMU, but he has been still splitting reps with Jennings. Seems to be a much more talented underclassman, but Preston Stone, the more experienced player. We'll see how that goes. The Duke Northwestern game, I'm hearing a little bit breezy there, lakefront on the practice field that Northwestern has converted to a makeshift home stadium, while their actual stadium is under massive renovations. Duke, Malik Murphy at quarterback, former backup to Quinn Ewers at Texas last season, if anybody remembers. The line on that one, interesting enough, Northwestern as low as negative 1.5. Minus 1.5 favorite right now. So this line has been bet to Duke. So they're juicing it Duke's way. I agree. I think Duke gets the win in this one. Got a couple of their players drafted in daily fantasy. I do have Northwestern's running back, I believe. Colton, I think his name is. Please don't hate me, Northwestern fans, if I got that wrong. And then I got SMU over BYU tonight. I'll be having those games up. I'll be watching them. You get some live reacts and whatnot while I'm streaming later. But yeah, those are my picks in those. Moving down the line, I think Penn State absolutely eviscerates Bowling Green. They continue that high-flying offense. Interesting matchup here with Oklahoma State hosting Arkansas. Oklahoma State looked really, really good last week. Arkansas, maybe an offensive, renaissance with Bobby Petrino calling plays now. Everybody says that he's the heir apparent to Sam Pittman when he inevitably gets fired. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I do like Mike Gundy and the Cowboys in this one. Currently, Oklahoma State favored -10 over under spread of 61.5. So they're expecting some points in this game. I just think most of them are going to the Cowboys, frankly. I do like that Petrino's calling plays again. I think that does do some great things for Arkansas. But Taylon Green, their quarterback, transfer from Boise State. He's literally never beaten a Power 5 team, or I guess nowadays Power 4. This would be a big stage for him. Going to the Cowboys. Those are the ones that hit the fucking paddles on the wall too, right? It's like right up there on the visiting side. It's gonna be a tough place to play. Kansas State Wildcats playing in New Orleans against the Tulane Green Wave. Avery Johnson. Didn't really see a whole lot from this offense last week. Maybe they were keeping the playbook a little vanilla. He also didn't run the ball as much as I think people expect him to. I don't know if that speaks more to a lack of confidence in their backups, should he go down with an injury, than it does a lack of confidence in him. I think a lot of people were hoping he would step forward as a passer. He threw for under 200 yards, if I remember correctly, last week. Yeah, 153 and a QBR 69.1. Did get 2 touchdowns on the board, though. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I like K-State in that. I think they probably just kind of establish a more dominant run game, maybe mix Avery in on some design QB runs. But I think they come out of it. I think it's a closer game than the spread indicates, potentially. Currently favored at K-State -8.5. This is getting bet back towards Tulane. I want to say it was at 9 earlier this week. So we'll see. Another interesting matchup, ACC, Georgia Tech at Syracuse. So Georgia Tech, the little darlings that took down Florida State in Ireland, right? They are currently riding a 2-0 wave, favored at -3 right now, which essentially says that if this game was played at home for Georgia Tech, they'd be less than a touchdown favorite. Why is that? Maybe because Kyle McCord, who transferred from Ohio State, is under center at Syracuse, and he threw for, was it 343, 354, and 4 touchdowns. Now, it was against Ohio, and Ohio also scored 22 points on their defense. This is an interesting game. I think Georgia Tech wants to establish the run game with Jamal Haynes. I think that Haynes King might be the better quarterback in overall experience, and he's got the dual threat capability. It'd be interesting to see what Syracuse's defense can do, because yes, it's great that you put up big numbers against Ohio. Is that offense ready-made to respond to the kind of things that Georgia Tech's offense could conceivably do to your defense? I don't really have a play in this one. It's one that I'll be kind of keeping my eye on. I won't be watching it. Obviously, I'll have the Texas-Michigan game going live. Maybe if I'm watching in here, I might have a little quad set up on the second monitor so I can watch multiple games at the same time. We'll see. Maybe this is one I have on. Maybe it's not. But I am interested in this one. If I had to pick, I just go with the team that's riding the success and the momentum and stay with the Yellow Jackets. But I liked what I saw from Kyle McCord last week. I really did. I think that their head coach kind of throwing the jab at Ryan Day, saying he should buy him a bottle of whiskey for letting him have him in the transfer portal. I think it's pretty funny. I think Syracuse could potentially be on the right track. Let's go down a little bit further. Utah hosting Baylor. I think the beginning of the end for oh God, why am I blanking on Baylor's head coach? Former LSU defensive coordinator when they won the national championship. Why did I just brain fart? No, don't do this to me. Please don't do this to me. It's just really not going to show up anywhere. Baylor head coach. I'm going to feel really stupid when I see it. Dave Aranda, Jesus Christ. So, Dave Aranda on the hottest of seats right now. I think this is the beginning of the end for the Dave Aranda era at Baylor. I really do. They bring in DeQuan Finn from Toledo in the transfer portal. I like DeQuan Finn. I got to watch him in a lot of action games last year. I was one of those sickos that was doing daily fantasy picks, and he got me some money here and there. But this Utah team's too fucking good, man. It's I'm not saying Utah's, national championship contender, but Cam Rising, healthy, put up video game numbers last week against Southern Utah. Freaking threw for 5 touchdowns, had a 97.5 QBR. They have a true sophomore running back, which, by the way, if anybody catches this before their daily fantasy picks are in, I'm here to tell you right now, Dijon Stanley, unless your daily fantasy provider has adjusted their lines on him, he could be a steal. Just keep an eye on this. He is not the listed starter, but he led the team in rushing yards and receiving yards last week. And the thing is most people like to check the play-by-play and be like, okay, what if he was scoring most of it in garbage time? Doesn't matter. This guy was putting up points and numbers in the first quarter. He is a 4-quarter player. They are going to try to get the ball in his hands. And if you hurry, you might be able to snag him for dirt cheap in your daily fantasy app. You heard it here first. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I don't think that Utah has the most prolific passing attack in college football, but I also just don't think that Baylor's defense could cover a Burger King tab with a stolen credit card. I think that they are going to handle I think Utah is going to handle Baylor rather easily. Currently a 14.5 point favorite. It might not be big enough. Immunity. coin or steal a term coined by Josh Pate. Let's see, the Cy-Hawk Trophy, Iowa hosting Iowa State. This rivalry, like most, if you actually kind of dig into them in college football, very one-sided. Iowa's pretty much dominated this rivalry. I think a lot of people like Rocco Becht at Iowa State quarterback. I don't think the offense is juicy enough to overcome what is an otherwise experienced and disciplined Iowa defense. I think Iowa's offense is still going to be bad. I do like their new receiver that they got, Reese Vanderzee, 66 yards, 5 receptions, 2 touchdowns. Cade McNamara had a good day. They ran for 119 with Caleb Johnson. Total of 241 rushing yards on the day, and they scored 40 points. The Iowa Hawkeyes scored 40 points. I would not expect to see those kind of numbers from the Hawkeyes every week for the remainder of the 2024 season. If I'm wrong, you can clip this and post it all over social media, and I will eat my crow with distinction and honor. But I will say this. I think Iowa wins this game. I think their defense is too much. Iowa State's going to have a disciplined defense as well. I just think it's going to be one of those rock fight games that Iowa just wins because Iowa wins these. I know a lot of people want Iowa State to be better and to be a player in the Big 12, and maybe they will be in conference play, but in this non-conference rivalry game, Iowa owns them. They will continue to own them tomorrow. Cal on the road as an ACC conference member facing an SEC conference member, the Auburn Tigers. Peyton Thorne put up really good numbers last week. Threw for 322 yards and 4 touchdowns, had a 98.5 QBR, and was dispersing the ball pretty well. Now, this was against Alabama A&M. Yes, the score was 73-3. He threw touchdown passes to 5 different receivers, and they ran for an additional 3 touchdowns. What do I think is going to happen here? I think that... Oh, sorry. He threw touchdown passes. He threw 4 touchdown passes. His backup ran or threw 2 touchdown passes. But 5 different receivers caught a touchdown pass for Auburn, okay, including true freshman wide receiver Cam Coleman, who looked really good. What do I think about Cal? I have nothing but respect for Coach Wilcox. He comes from the Chris Peterson coaching tree and is always known for stout and disciplined defense, kind of held Auburn to less points than they were really expecting when they went and visited them in Berkeley last season. I think the defense keeps it somewhat respectable early on, but right now the line is Auburn minus 11.5, over under point total spread of 53.5. I kind of think Auburn covers here. I think they win by 2 touchdowns. I think the improvements they made in the transfer portal, Peyton Thorne is not a world beater of a quarterback, but he's going to be more than enough to handle a Cal team that I just think, yes, they have Jaden Ott at running back. Yes, he's pretty damn good at running the ball, but is that really what you want going up against an SEC defensive line? Do you want running the ball to be your answer on offense? Good luck. The biggest game of the week, Washington versus Eastern Michigan. I'm just kidding. Washington covers. Moving on. I got to kind of wrap this up. So, some other interesting games. Let's see. Does South Florida get the upset against Bama? I know it was a close game last year. No. The South Florida cover against Bama. The line's at Alabama minus 31 right now. That's a lot of points to win by. And they might do it. Ooh, I like this game. This is my predicted upset of the week. Okay? And no, it's not Oregon Boise State, which we will talk about in a second. Kansas on the road as the 19th ranked team in the country, playing the Illinois Fighting Illini in Champaign. The line on this is only Kansas minus 4.5. It's not a lot, especially considering some of you are probably listening to this and then like, I didn't even know Illinois had a college football team. They do. Hasn't been very good lately. I think a lot of people were expecting them to improve last year. They kind of did. They might have been a year early in their expectations. This is a dangerous game for Kansas. I really do. Saw a lot of good things from Illinois' offense last week. Granted, it was against Illinois State, I believe. Eastern Illinois. My apologies. I think Illinois has the ability to run the ball well. I think that Kansas has the ability to run the ball well. I think Illinois has the better defensive line. I think Kansas and Illinois' receiving cores are, I don't want to say comparable, but like, how should I think about this? I think a lot of people think about last season with Kansas, and they think about Andy Kotelnicki as the offensive coordinator and just scheming guys wide open. Well, guess what? He's gone. Okay, he's not the OC anymore. He's turning Drew Aller into a Heisman contender if fans in Happy Valley have their way. But Kansas's offense didn't exactly struggle against Check's notes. Lindenwood. They scored 48 points against Lindenwood. I'm picking Illinois to win this. I'm picking Illinois to win outright and cover, obviously. I don't hate Kansas. I think Devin Neal is a phenomenal running back. I think that Jalen Daniels at quarterback can be an elite playmaker for them when he's healthy. The thing is that are you really getting answers as to whether he's durable enough for a whole season against a team like Lindenwood? Or is a defense like Illinois is going to be able to come in and cause some problems and force them to open up the playbook and really see what they're made of? I think so. I think this is a game that the line is close for a reason. Over under point total of 57.5. I don't think it's that many points. I don't. I'm taking the under, and I'm taking Illinois to cover and win outright. All right. Big game coming up next, if I saw correctly on my little. Yes, here it is. The Fighting Deons taking on the Corn Boys of Nebraska. I will be watching this game, for the record. This will be one that I have a lot of interest in because I have some skin in the game. I've drafted quite a few of their players in daily fantasy. After a close game against North Dakota State in week 1, are people really that confident in Colorado's ability to go on the road to Lincoln and beat a Matt Rule in year 2 football program in the Nebraska Cornhuskers? Current line is Nebraska minus 6.5. Now, there is home field advantage baked into that, which means that they'd be just over a field goal favorite on a neutral site. That's not a lot. Here's the thing. I think there's way too much money juicing the Colorado side of that line because Colorado fans are rabid and have immense support and loyalty to their team, as they should. I respect them for it. Lord knows that Colorado being successful would be a great thing for that state, that program. I just don't think you have the right people at the helm of your ship, unfortunately. I'm not really going to say much past that. I think the reluctance or outright refusal to establish a run game against an inferior or supposed inferior opponent in North Dakota State says a lot about what their priorities are on offense in Boulder. And if I'm Nebraska, who has a pretty decent defense, people remember correctly last year's game where Colorado won, and I know Colorado fans are like, we beat them and we scored points on them last year. You scored a lot of points because Jeff Sims, the Fumblerooski champion of 2023, was giving you guys phenomenal field position on a majority of your drives. If Dylan Raiola can take care of the football as a true freshman, again, it's a lot to ask, but if Dylan Raiola can take care of the football better than Jeff Sims and force you guys to drive the field against a defense that was giving you fits earlier on in that game, if I'm Nebraska's defensive coordinator, I'm lightening up the box. I'm dropping defenders into coverage and challenging your elite receivers. Elite by their estimation. I think Travis is pretty clearly elite. Jimmy Horn Jr., maybe. Everybody else, we'll see. Yeah. I'm going like 3 down linemen and daring you to run it at me. Quite frankly. If you were keeping the playbook light against North Dakota State for that purpose, okay, fine. Then I switch game plans once I realize that you are willing to go to the run game, and I start dialing up blitz packages, and I expose Shedeur for his greatest weakness. And that's that he hangs onto the football far too long in search of making big plays. And if I can generate pressure on your quarterback, who is extremely talented, but sometimes makes questionable decisions when put under pressure, and my offense is going to score on your defense, by the way. Colorado's defense didn't show me anything last week that tells me that drastic improvements were made, that facing Power 4 competition is going to somehow be better than it was against North Dakota State. Nebraska's going to score. Colorado's going to score. I think Nebraska's defense needs to and should and probably will, if my hunch is correct, they will put Shedeur Sanders and that Colorado offense in a position where they either commit to something that they don't seem ready or willing to commit to, or they sell out for the passing game and pray that their playmakers are better than yours. That is a high-risk, high-reward play style, whereas Nebraska is playing with a little bit more house money on that. I'm taking Nebraska, but I ain't taking them to cover. I'm taking Colorado to cover, but I'm taking Nebraska to win outright. I think this is a field goal game. I really do. I think this is a game that Nebraska wins on a field goal, or that maybe Colorado loses on a field goal. Can't make it through the uprights in the fourth quarter. Yeah, I'm really interested in that game. That one's gonna probably be like game of the week type material. So moving on, Oklahoma's gonna absolutely just abolish Houston from the continental U.S. Clemson, I think, gets right. You know, you lose the best team in the country, and people think that you're a poverty program. No, Clemson's still very clearly got a top 10 to 15 defense in NCAA. The offense, I think that against inferior competition, it's going to do enough. We'll talk about them in later weeks when their quality of competition starts to fluctuate more frequently. But I think against App State, App State's a tricky team. Currently, Clemson favored minus 16.5. I think the number's too big. I'm going to take App State to cover, but I'm taking Clemson to win outright. I think Phil Mafah has a big day, too. Yep. Oregon at Boise State. Sorry, Boise State at Oregon. A lot of people have this one circled. I get I'm a Husky fan. I'm supposed to sharpen my knives and come at this with my teeth bared. I'll just say this. Look, I wasn't impressed with what I saw from Oregon last week. I don't think Oregon fans are impressed with what they saw from Oregon last week. I don't think Dan Lanning was impressed with what he saw from his team last week. The press conference post-game, you could tell. I don't recall what kind of shoes Dan was wearing. I would assume Nikes. They probably had some doo-doo on him at the press conference because he had just got done breaking his foot off in some asses leaving that locker room. You could tell he was heated. This has bounce back written all over it. I think they probably come back. I think the line is a bit big, minus 20. Boise has a winning record against Oregon. Matter of fact, Oregon has never beaten Boise State. I think that changes tomorrow. You know, if Christmas comes early and I'm wrong, okay, fine. I'll take the L and the W, I guess, at the same time. But this is a situation where I just have to look at it. It's like my personal feelings on the program and the rivalry and whatnot aside. Like I can't look at what is without question an exceptionally more talented roster. And yes, Boise has Ashton Jeanty. They're not going to run like that against everybody. I'm sorry. That was a flash in the pan. He's a fantastic running back. He's probably going to have a very successful career in the league. But as far as tomorrow, yeah, he'll put up points. He might be a good daily fantasy pick. But if you're betting on Boise to win outright because of an overreaction to week 1 shenanigans against Idaho, you might be disappointed. You know, Washington State, Texas Tech. I hope they have a basketball officiating crew for this game. I think this is going to be a high-flying affair. Washington State hung like 1,000 points on their week 1 opponent. Texas Tech did the same. Baron Morton and Mateer is the Washington State quarterback's name. I think they combined for something like 11 bajillion passing yards. So 378 for Morton through the air, and Mateer threw for 352. So over 700 yards passing between the two teams coming out of week 1. Washington State scored 70 points. Texas Tech scored a shit ton as well. They also had 51 points hung on them by Abilene Christian. Washington State surrendered 30 points, I believe it was, to whoever the hell it was they were playing. Portland State, that's right. Defense will probably be found somewhere underneath the grandstands eating sandwiches halfway through the third quarter, and people will be like, you were supposed to show up today. This one's going to be fun. If you've got Mateer or Baron Morton fantasy team, I think it's going to be a good week for you. We'll see, though. That one, line's even. It's dead even. And it's in Pullman. That's Pullman, Washington, by the way, for those of you that don't know. Which means that on a neutral field, that Texas Tech would be favored, if I got my math right. Because, Texas Tech would be favored on a neutral field. Over under 66.5. It's a lot. It might not be enough. I'll do for Wazoo what I wouldn't do for Oregon. Fuck the Cougs. Texas Tech wins on the road. There's nothing to cover. Line's even. Over under 66.5. I'm betting the over, and I'm taking Texas Tech to win. I think Washington State beating up on Portland State, kind of like Oregon did last season, should not be indicative of the expected results of your season. Savvy? All right, cool. Let's see. The Sun Devils of Arizona State are hosting the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Mississippi State with head coach Jeff Lebby now there in his offense. Blake Shapen threw for 247 and 3 touchdowns with a 97 QBR. He was also the team's leading rusher, which is a little concerning for me. He only put up 44 yards rushing. So who do they have at running back is a great question. I know they lost Marks to USC, who we're going to talk about here briefly. Man, the line's currently ASU minus 5.5, over under point total of 58.5. Fuck it, man. I want Kenny Dillingham to get some sunshine on his nose. You know, like let's take the Sun Devils. The former Pac-12 homer in me will come out here. I like the Jeff Lebby hire at Mississippi State. For games like this. Just games like this in the future. I think that obviously it's going to be something that, are we expecting Mississippi State to be a world beater in the SEC ever? No, probably not. But I think year one on the road against an Arizona State team with a quarterback in Sam Leavitt that is young, but a bit more talented than people initially maybe thought he was going to be. Also returning veteran running back Cam Scatabo, which is by and large one of the funnest names to say in college football. I'll take the Sun Devils. I'll take the Sun Devils to win, and I've done this a lot, but I'm going to do it again. I'll take Mississippi State to cover, though. I think maybe win by a field goal or something like that. Make it interesting. I got Oregon State beating San Diego State. If you guys haven't looked at that right now, go look at their rushing stats in week 1 and tell me which running back you think's better. First person in the comments that answers that question, I don't know, you get like a crisp high five or something. And then I think USC is going to bloody up Utah State's nose with the final billet of the evening at 10 p.m. in the Big Ten Network. It's going to be a fun week. It's going to be a fun week later on this evening. So you're probably going to be watching this later. But maybe by then the conversation is happening live in Discord. Maybe not. I don't know. But I'm going to be hosting some homies from my college fantasy league that I made. And we're going to be talking a little bit more just kind of water cooler type jazz about our fantasy league, some stuff coming up this week, and be a little bit less formal than this. But I hope that this was cool and that people enjoyed it. I really want to start doing this week to week, and kind of cutting it up and pushing it out on the YouTube channel. Yeah, it's great. But let me know in the comments who you guys have in some of these games that I talked about. Let me know if you hate my takes. Let me know if you hate me. I'm sure that's typically how the discourse goes in most of these. There's really very rarely times when people are just like, I agree with everything that you just said, sir. You can come over to my house and fuck my wife. No, that's not happening. But yeah, no, super awesome. I'll be here all weekend reacting to games live, and we can talk about it. It's going to be a great time. Peace.